Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Housing and Economic Development Committee. I'm James Torrance, Chair of the committee and representative of the 7th Council District. Today I'm joined by committee members, Vice Chair Odette Ramos, Councilman Jermaine Jones of the 12th District.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Zach Blanchard of the 11th District. Council President Zeke Mosby. Oh, Lord, jeez. Whoa. Zeke Cohen, sorry. Sorry, it's been a long day, y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Apologies, all.
To be fair, I mocked him on the way to the bathroom.
You did hit me in the head with the door. So, Council President Zeke Cohen, Tyler Schneller, Isaiah Griffin from the Mayor's Office, as well as we have Justin Williams, Director of Permitting Services, Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner. I believe this is Leela Lehman from Chief Information Officer, as well as Jason Hessler, Deputy Commissioner of Housing, and Calvin Young, Deputy Mayor. The committee staff from the committee, President is Tony Leva. This evening, the committee is meeting to discuss 25003R, informational hearing permit reforms, for the purpose of inviting representatives from the Department of Housing and Community Development, the Office of the City Administrator, the Baltimore City Fire Department, the Office of the Fire Marshal, and other relevant parties to provide information on reforms to the Department of Housing and Community Development's permit system. And right now, we'll have opening remarks from Council President Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank Chair Torrance and Vice Chair Ramos for their continued attention to the deficiencies in our permitting system. This is Baltimore's moment. Violent crime has declined to unprecedented levels. The City Council, our mayor, and our governor are all aligned around ushering in our city's renaissance. In so many ways, we are meeting this moment, but not when it comes to the permit system. The Acela permitting system has now been in use in Baltimore for just over 1 year, and this is the 4th hearing in this committee to conduct oversight on this system. Right before our first hearing on this topic, the administration introduced its Be More Fast plan and promised to revamp the permitting process. A year later, however, we are still discussing the unacceptable delays that homeowners, entrepreneurs, and builders are facing when they try to get permits to work on their homes or build new projects. If we are serious about rehabbing thousands of vacant homes, we must fix this system. This City Council is committed to oversight. That commitment means that we are going to demand corrective action when something is not working. Live Baltimore just released a report stating that Baltimore has the potential to add more than 20,000 homes over the next 5 years. People want to live and do business here, and we all want to welcome them to our city. Yet by most accounts, our permitting process is inhibiting development and slowing our potential growth. 11 months ago, here in this chamber, the administration acknowledged what was needed from our permitting system and stated, and I quote, "Now more than ever, we need a permitting process that works for everyone, a process that's accessible to all of our residents and businesses, not just those who can afford specialized help. A process that is efficient, because time is money, and a waste of time means wasted opportunity, and yes, a process that's accountable to the people of the city who deserve to see the government working effectively on their behalf." Our current permitting process is not accessible for most and not efficient nor accountable for anyone. You should not have to call or email Justin Williams personally to move your permit through the process, and yet, by and large, that still seems to be the best, if not only option to move permits quickly. I know that many people have been working diligently to make improvements over the past year. Several of them have testified before this committee, and while I'm not going to cite quotes, each in their own way has assured us that improvements were just around the corner. Unfortunately, our community is still waiting for those long-promised improvements. We're still waiting for a system that speeds the effort to eliminate vacant buildings and spur investments in the neighborhoods that have for too long faced disinvestment. Therefore, tonight, I'm calling for 3 key things to happen. First, I want the administration to clearly identify who is in charge of the permitting process. Every time we have a hearing, someone else seems to be in charge. It's a simple but critical question. Who is in charge, and what power do they have to make the changes that need to be made to fix the system? Second, the council, and particularly the chair and vice chair of this committee, and all stakeholders need a formal feedback loop on the progress that's being made. I want a monthly working group to be convened with representatives from my office, the chair and vice chair and their offices, members of the permit team, and a group of external users to ensure that impactful progress is being made and communicated to council and all stakeholders in real time. Finally, I'm calling for the full consolidation of the permitting process as outlined in the Be More Fast plan to, and I quote from the plan itself, institutionalize improvements in cross-agency collaboration and process efficiency. Specifically, I want to receive a plan within 6 months detailing how all permitting processes will be consolidated in one agency under one leader who has both the mandate and the authority to make the system work. This is Baltimore's moment, but we must meet it on all fronts. We're in this together. The council will continue to collaborate with the administration in good faith. That's what Baltimore deserves. People want to see us working together to solve problems. And our city deserves a permit system that is high functioning and effective. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll keep my remarks brief. It has been nearly a year. A lot has happened within that year. I've seen improvements from regular day citizens, but I also know that we can do better. But I also am a council person who came into this government during the workday snafu. And what I've seen is a lack of systems change in terms of our technology department and bringing on new technology for our agencies. What I would like to say, to caveat the council president's remarks, is that we need a system in place where if we're bringing on a new system, we need a redundant system. This is a conversation I've had with the administration. I believe that that is how we can change systems. There is no reason that we could have slowly permits to another system while maintaining the legacy system so that there was no interference or no lag in what we can do as an agency. That oversight lacks. As I learned a long time ago at Colorado Tech and then in college when I did systems, junk in, junk out, right? We can't fix a system if we're transporting things over. I still remember the calls I got from firefighters and regular citizens who worked in our government who could not get a paycheck once we switched over to Workday because someone did not enter their social security number on the other end prior to the actual exchange of the information into the new system. Small things like that can destroy one system. And I would like to work with the administration to figure out how we can work with our technology office to create a process that's similar to corporate America and others that can prevent this from happening again, because at the end of the day, the end user is the person who's harmed. And the trust in government to deliver a system is always undermined. And this is the second time since I've taken office that this has happened. With that being said, I will yield to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. President. Thanks also to DHCD. I know that this is a lot of work that's already been put into doing the fixes that need to be done to the permit system. We're still getting some complaints. Actually, I have more people just not using permits, which then compromises the health and safety of the houses that we're trying to rehab. And that issue, I think, is front and center for me. And so how we make sure that we're sending the message that things are getting better, if they are getting better, what you're working on, but also I'll ask questions about the prevention piece and the proactive inspections, because we are seeing that there is still an increase of people not using permits, and that is not going to be good for our city. If we want the 20,000 households to come, they have to make sure that the health and safety standards of their house is going to be up to par, and it's not going to be if the builder doesn't use permits. So I think that's been very important, and I look forward to the continuing dialogue about this. And we also want to be your partner. I mean, we want to be helpful, not just here, asking questions, but actually in the work, in the weeds with you, because we are hearing a lot from the residents. And so it's going to be, we definitely want to continue this work. A year out, and I guess we'll talk a little bit about some improvements. We got data recently from OpenGov that we're not quite where we used to be. And so that is also concerning. So this is really the pinnacle of, I think, the strategy to rehab our vacant properties, and we have to get this right. And I'm glad that you're working through it and trying to be diligent, which is maybe why we're not seeing as many things happen as quickly. But I'm very much looking forward to hearing what the progress is and how we can help move things forward in a expedited but strategic way. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. The committee will hear from an invited guest witness, Mr. Hassan Thamir, representing HF2 Properties, a small but growing developer focusing on residential rehabilitation and development in and around Baltimore. Mr. Thamir.
Was that the right button? Okay. Hi, I'm Hassan Thamir. I'm representing HF2 Properties. We're a small developer here in Baltimore. We just completed and sold our 16th project yesterday. I'm here to say we have an aligned goal, I believe, which is to meet the housing demand in Baltimore City with homes that are built safely, efficiently, and consistently, while preserving neighborhood personality and historic pedigree. To that end, last year and the year before, we took on our biggest deal yet, which I'm going to outlay here. It was in Hamden, a single dilapidated family home, and we converted it to a 4-unit apartment building. We did off-street parking to support the additional parking burden. The lot prior to us taking over was dilapidated and overgrown and had overhanging trees that were a danger to the neighbors, and it was a known local hotspot for crime. We turned that lot with a negative impact on the neighborhood into one with a very positive impact, and in doing so, we also increased revenue for the city 6-fold from $2,000 to $13,000 in property tax. From the signals I'm seeing and hearing from city leadership, this is the exact type of project that I believe the city is trying to motivate more of, and that's revitalizing existing housing to thoughtfully add housing density where there's overwhelming demand for it, while making sure to positively impact the surrounding community. Towards the end of our project, we were met with drawn-out timelines and ambiguity about the permit process. Our use and occupancy permit took 3 months to obtain. We applied on April 3rd and got it on July 4th. The first holdup that we had was that we were told that we had no inspections or building permits in the system, and at the time I was holding the paper inspection slips in hand that inspector had given to me physically. And then after that, we were told that we needed a fire safety inspection, but that wasn't communicated to us for almost a month of no movement, and then we had a 2-week scheduling time frame followed by a 2-week delay before this was shown in the permit system as approved. When the fire inspector got there, he told me that the inspection, he doesn't know why he was there, it wasn't required, and it still shows is not required to this day in the permitting system. This 3-month delay cost us $21,000 in direct costs, which was for loan extensions, additional months of interest, and additional months of insurance. And if I add in the 2 or 3 months of lost rent, it's over $40,000 of a hit that we took. This should have been a home run for all of us, for the city and for us. But at the end, we would have made more money doing a cosmetic rehab on a row home, and that was crushing. In my belief, the winning parties were basically everybody but us. The lender got more interest, the city's gonna get more property taxes, the contractor got paid on time, the community gained high-quality neighbors and increased property values. The previous owner, we helped her get into a retirement community that she wanted to be in and out of a bad situation. And the only losing party that we could find were us, who took all the risk and set the project in motion, and the prospective tenants who were looking for a place to live. That type of hit just simply isn't sustainable for a business to endure, and this turned a project that should have been a home run into a project that we never wanted to look at again. Since then, we've taken on 2 more projects, and they've been great row home renovations. I'm hopeful that all the input that's being shared will be incorporated into a solution that creates a robust and efficient permit system that works for everybody. And combined with the updated zoning regulations and other signals recently passed by city leadership, that would really encourage us to take on more projects of this size, scope, and complexity, which should be a win-win for everybody. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. I will now turn it over to Justin Williams for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you controlling this? Great. Good evening, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, Council President, members of the committee. For the record, I am Justin Williams. I am the Director of Permitting and Development Services for the City of Baltimore. As I've mentioned in prior hearings for this committee, we recognize that some of these permit statistics aren't just numbers on a screen. They represent investment in time and capacity, and that every delay actually has a real impact. And so I appreciate the investment that Mr. I'm sorry, I forget your last name, Downey? Fatmer, invest in the community, and this is one reason I came from the private sector to city government to help fix these issues, because it's near and dear to my heart, and I know firsthand from my professional experience that time kills deals and time can be impactful. And that's why I'm happy to be able to say that the data tonight shows a clear story that Baltimore's permitting system has turned the corner. Tonight, I'll walk you through some of the reforms we've implemented since October in our last hearing, and show some data that proves this turnaround, and I'll talk about the roadmap for where we go next. So I guess we'll stay in this slide. So this slide here, and this addresses the Council President's question he raised in the beginning of his remarks. Mayor Scott has been clear that our permitting structure needs support, not hold back Baltimore's renaissance. And I want to be clear about the operational responsibility for improving permitting. This is a whole government approach involving leadership of housing, planning, BSIT, fire, mayor's office, and many of whom are here tonight. But as the Director of Permitting and Development Services, and colloquially the permit czar, I'm the person responsible for the day-to-day implementation of the permit improvement work, the coordination of these agencies, and the delivery of results. As you can see from this slide, each of these operational components live in various agencies, but the relevant teams still report to their agencies, who themselves are engaged in the effort. But it is my role as that Director of Permitting Development Services to facilitate the necessary cross-agency collaboration and execution required to achieve the improvements we recognize we need, and we all agree that we need. I can go next slide, Tony. When we met in October, I think I testified that we were still in stabilization mode. Since that time, we've deployed over 30 specific technical and process fixes to make progress. This slide here represents a portion of the day-to-day improvements to workflow and automation we've been focused on. Just to call it a few, we've automated assignments within each workflow task, so the permits move more quickly and instantly and aren't stuck in limbo and without clarity on who's supposed to be working on the permit. We've implemented gating rules so that people can't file amendments to an application in certain instances when they shouldn't be, and that previously broke the system logic and led to people being delayed. We've also refined our inspection logic so people can't request an inspection at the wrong time, which also clogged our queue and led to more phone calls back and forth. Go next slide, Tony. Actually, go back real quick, I'm sorry. And we've also shown, for example, on the application page, when a contractor is needed. There's a lot of back and forth in the front gate, the front door, the application didn't take space to say, you need this contractor. Now we have information on the application that says you need a plumbing contractor, or you need a gas fitter, for example. Next slide. We've also focused heavily on the user integrity and the user interface and data integrity. We've refined an intake portal to clarify questions and reduce user error at the front door. We've improved the visibility of the contractor requirements, ensuring applications are complete before they even reach a reviewer, and we've run a systemic cleanup of stale records to ensure that the data we're reporting is accurate. This technical work has been the necessary foundation for the results I'm going to show you in the next slide, but they also lay the groundwork for additional improvements that the team will be building on. And to call out just the ones on this slide here, you see that the results are that the permits and application intake at the front door, even in October, were 1,093, and now we brought that down to 158 as of February 3rd. Even a small quick update to the website on the external facing site to show where your application is in the process. This caused a lot of phone calls when it was a check mark versus a hourglass. So having just a key is one of those small things that we can do, and we have done, to provide more clarity on permit milestones. Next slide. And as you can see, the results are getting undeniable. Since October, we've seen a 46.1 decrease in overall permits awaiting the city to act. That's the purple bar there. On October, 3450, and February 3rd, 1860. We've done this through a few different ways. For example, in the front door, I mentioned a couple times already stated here. Back in June, well, in July, I testified that in June, there were nearly 1,800 permits that hadn't been touched, that were waiting for someone to take action, sometimes waiting for months, unfortunately. Today, that number, well, as of last week, the number was 68. That's 96% reduction. Speed, and it'll be the next slide. We've shown in October, the median time to issue a residential permit, 1 and 2 family combo permit, was 12 days. In January, it was 3 days. In October, in our last hearing, we testified the auto issuance is going to be a concept we're bringing online. Today, it handles about 20% of our volume. That is, and it represents 1,300 permits that are not backlogged, waiting on human review, where it's not necessary, where you don't have to call Justin Williams to get the permit out, for example. I think we're on the slide here. So as you can see, you can go back. As you can see on that slide, for the residential, these are the BRCM permits, which make up the bulk of our volume. 80% of permits issued by the city are these residential permits. We've achieved a 75% reduction in the median issuance time. Again, so 75% reduction in issuance time, from 12 days in October to 3 days median in January 2026. That's a real impact that our residents and local developers are starting to feel, which can mean the difference between a project stalling or moving forward. Next slide. And this data is also validated by our call center statistics here on this slide. We have achieved a 38% reduction in the total calls to the permit call center. That means the public is not just seeing and feeling the results. They're not, it shows the public is seeing and feeling the results. They're not just showing up on our internal dashboards. The chart shows the volume of calls to the permit call center, and you can see the trend line going downward. And while we're still optimizing our system and have a lot of work to do ahead of us, this drop in volume validates that fewer people are stuck in permit purgatory. The system is stabilizing, and users are finding it easier to navigate. However, and this is, right slide. We know the work is not finished. The team continues to make the necessary improvements to build on this progress, and we have significant steps to take in this next phase of our work, including, just to call it a few things, technical enhancements. This is the one we recognize and hear often. We are building the in-house message board to get conversations out of email and text and calls and emails to Justin Williams into the record. We are also going to be updating the public portal to show exactly who is assigned to review, so people know who is actually reviewing their permit application. Accountability. We'll be working to establish and adjust internal controls, including by establishing clear service level expectations. From there, I'll be working with agency heads to ensure we're holding supervisors and managers accountable, for hitting the goals we set. Consolidation, I'll be working with other leaders in the administration to further strengthen this operating structure to ensure we have the capacity needed to move all the items forward identified in the Be More Fast plan. And for ongoing feedback, I've been re-engaging.
I'm sorry, Justin, could you say that last part again? I heard consolidation, but I lost it for a second.
At this stage, I'm working with the administration to strengthen the operating structure of my office. So I didn't mention at the beginning, but I have a deputy director now in my office of permitting and development services. And so having the strengthening and more established structure to actually start moving some of the reforms called from the Be More Fast plan forward. And then for ongoing feedback, I've been meeting with industry groups like the MBIA, ULI, I presented to the base network, but look forward to engaging in more oversight and collaboration with you and your team and members of the development community to ensure we're hearing the feedback from those closest to the work. In closing, Mr. Chair, Mr. Council President, we have stabilized the foundation, and now we are building on that foundation to get the system to where it needs to be for our residents. We are building a permitting system that respects the time, the money, and the trust of every resident investing in Baltimore. And we will not rest until Baltimore has a permitting engine that accelerates Baltimore's renaissance rather than holding it back. Looking forward to talking more and answering questions you may have.
Thank you, colleagues. For this round of questioning, I'll start with the council president, then Councilwoman Ramos, then I'll open up to you two, and then I'll go last.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Czar. Also want to thank the deputy mayor, who I know has been active and has really jumped in here. I'm just going to note for the record, Councilmember Ramos and I, as well as the deputy mayor, just recently met with a number of builders, and I would say, while I appreciate and am excited to hear that you feel we are turning a corner, that does not match what we were told. And so I don't know if there's like a lag between what you're experiencing and what the end user is experiencing, but I will just say the feedback that we're hearing has not been of much improvement. There's still concerns about lack of portal, lack of feedback loop, et cetera. So just want to level set a little bit. So just so we're crystal clear here, Justin, you are in charge of, Mr. Williams, you are in charge of permitting. That is correct?
Yes, I'm directly responsible for day-to-day operations of the permitting functions across city government.
Okay. Many cities across the country are seeing improvements in their permit process by consolidating their permit system under one agency. And as I said in my opening statement, and I think as you said a little bit as well, this reform was called for in the #1 cornerstone of the Be More Fast plan. So my question is, when will we receive the plan for consolidating the permit structure? Can you produce it in 6 months, or do you need more time?
So I guess to clarify, what was written in the Be More Fast plan, which I principally authored, was first that we would establish an office for what is my role, that we did have a dedicated development services coordination office to provide and then to have more staff support for me to help move the reforms forward. Longer term, and this is, I'm reading now from the Be More Fast plan, the city should, in the next 2 to 3 years, undertake a comprehensive evaluation of potentially consolidating development-related staff and functions from various agencies into a unified development services department. So that is where I would like to push things out. I think there are many reforms to do with Acela still, and in the permit system, and the processes currently before looking forward to bringing agencies together and moving people around, because there's just so much that needs to be done in the short term.
What I'm asking for is for one agency to have principal control over the system, so that what we continue to hear is confusion and muddle and challenges with interagency operability. And so what I'm seeking is a plan to consolidate, whether that is within your Office of Permitting or someplace else. What I am asking for is that there is one overarching agency, and the fire department and DHCD and all the rest are within that structure, so that you can demand of them whatever it is they need.
I understand what you're saying. I guess I'm not prepared to recommend that path because I haven't done the research or full thinking about all the issues that come along with making a new agency from scratch. My view of where the problems are about coordination, but that's where my role is there to.
I'm not asking for a new agency from scratch. I want to be really clear here. I'm asking for one agency, whether it is the Office of Permitting, whether it is the DHCD, fire, I don't really care. I just need some agency to control the process. And again, this is, I thought, what you had articulated as the principal author of the Be More Fast plan. So just, again, trying to get clarity on.
I mean, yeah, but I think it said we would, and I'll read it again, like, the city should undertake a comprehensive evaluation of potentially consolidating development-related staff and functions from various agencies into a unified development services department. We should you should, and I will demand an assessment and evaluation be done. But at this point, I'm not personally confident that it's the right path, because given where I am sitting and seeing day-to-day in the trenches for the past year, is it's not the issue of having agencies coordinate. It's about issues with like staying on top of the project management and moving reforms forward, which now is going to be happening with my role and having staff capacity to help me get the things done that need to be done.
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I believe you raised your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Calvin Young, Deputy Mayor for Economic Development. The administration can confer and reply with a response to the committee on this request.
I appreciate that. Mr. Chair, if I could just sort of formalize that request so that it's clear in what I'm asking. I am asking for a consolidated approach to permitting where there is one key functioning agency that determines interoperability between other agencies so that we can move in a coordinated fashion for permits.
To simplify that, you're asking who's the offensive coordinator for permits and where they're moving with X's and O's is basically what you're saying. So Justin is in charge of the permitting system in terms of shepherdizing the processes to make them efficient. So you want to know, and I'm just systems thinking, and I'm just be plain, where's the org chart and how it goes and who reports to who, basically? Because I still have the question, because I do know you still do BMZA stuff. So it's like, where does he lie on the org chart? Whether he's in the mayor's office, or is he in DCHD, or is he in planning? Those are all questions that I think need to be answered to then say, how is he then supporting the other agencies in the system? And I think that's where the council president's getting to. And then whether or not his office is a real office that lives in an org chart under a specific agency, just to put it plainly. Is that right, Mr. President?
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, right-of-way permits, DPW permit, there's all the different types of permits, all the different agencies, and I think the chair articulated it well. There needs to be a formal structure. There needs to be a clear org chart. Again, I'm just going to repeat feedback that I heard from builders, and my colleague was there, that there is this feeling that a permit will get to one side of the house and it'll get stuck, and it's not clear who can yoke it out unless a developer or builder knows someone that has political pull, and that's not a good system. We want the system to work fairly for everybody. Is that clear? Between the chair and myself?
It is clear. I played Division II football, so I get the football analogy.
It's easier to put it that way.
But yes, it is clear where we need to go. That's why, I mean, I think we need to do the evaluation. I think it's fair to call for that assessment. I started my career doing land use in Baltimore County right when they switched to a Department of Permit Approvals and Inspections. There were good sides and bad sides of that, and there the director had a hat in the county executive's office and in the Department of Permits, Approvals, and Inspections, but they kept inspections separate for like the fire and Rec and Parks, which did their landscape manual requirements. So there are pros and cons to each, but this is where I just don't feel confident to say this is the best way to go. I do feel confident with what you're saying and recognize there needs to be better coordination, which was what my role is designed to do, and start having more materials just be clear to the public so that they know where to go, because it basically is, unfortunately, people like my head and Deputy Commissioner Hessler's head, it needs to be clear for everybody. And this is where I've said to other people too, I hope to put myself out of a job as a land use attorney, because a lot of the things I did as a land use attorney were just like do basic city functions for people that could be done by a layperson. And so that is my goal, to make things user-friendly so that most things can be done by the average member of the public, because they shouldn't need a land use lawyer or a permit expediter to do most of the things they do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'll just end this line by saying, in a lot of the research that we've looked at, this seems to be the way. It is about consolidation. It's about having clear controls. It's about knowing both the structure, the org chart, et cetera. Mr. Chair, I'll reserve my next questions till if we go back around.
Okay, last thing, timeline. That's the last thing I did not hear, so I just want to be clear. When can we expect that from
I
you
think
guys?
we need to confer as a team, and then we can provide a response to the committee.
Can we get a response within a week
Yes,
about the timeline?
on time, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many questions per round? 2, gotcha, okay.
And follow-ups do count.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Justin, you mentioned, or Director Williams, you mentioned the message board, which has been a big deal because not everybody looks at their email all the time, but they were relying on being able to just go in and just kind of see everything. My understanding was that that was actually never a scope of work for Acela to begin with, which would be unfortunate because that was probably one of the functions that was working the best in the old system. So what's the timeline in getting the message board?
I need to defer to people who are closer to the timeline. And I might need to follow up with you, unfortunately. I'm told by the team that we're aiming for the spring of 2026. I obviously don't want to be,
So spring being end of March to sometime end of June.
so we're currently beta testing now, it sounds like, I'm told. I've not been as close to this part of the reform work. I'm just
Yeah, we're need to go into beta testing, which would be spring in March, and then we would be able to move forward from there.
And,
And this is being built in-house in partnership with the Office of Performance Innovation.
And so you'll have some of the super users and users, and maybe even not so super users, even people that are not very familiar with the system. Like when I went in as a demo, I was like, I needed a little bit of assistance. So you'll be doing that kind of testing.
Yes, which is similar to having, super users and regular users that had been testing the program before as well.
Yeah. Is there a challenge with the systems talking to each other since it's going to be something that's built directly, which, by the way, I thought we were trying to avoid by going to Acela? Is having to redo stuff and hope that that person never leaves?
So Layla Lehman,
Hi.
interim CIO for the city. So it is, when there is a need to build something in-house, that is what we do, right? Not everything, though, needs to be built in-house. The messaging app in particular was something that is so custom that it really had to be built as a specialty. And one of the things that OPI is working in concert with my team as well as Acela is that integration.
And somebody will know the codes for when that person who
Yes,
doesn't know.
yes.
it.
So
Okay.
this is all, the best practices are being used in code repositories, right? And all of the things that were not necessarily in place, to your point, when the original system was developed.
Okay. Thank you. I look forward to hopefully being one of your beta testers. And also suggesting some other folks that would be good beta testers. My second question, I didn't see anywhere in the slides about some of the improvements that you're making moving forward about the thing that I think is one of the most important things here, which is particularly since we have this expedited permit thing, I'm worried, and I know it's happening, that someone's gonna apply for an expedited permit for something small and then do a gut rehab, and we didn't know about it. And so what I had asked for, and I was supposed to get by this hearing, is a report on where we are on the proactive inspection or proactivity of something where if somebody's getting a permit, you hadn't heard from them for a while, or even if you do hear from them, you know, that somebody is calling or going to the property and going, oh gosh, gee whiz, this is a gut rehab and they don't have a permit for a gut rehab, as opposed to waiting for the person to call for an inspector because that's how it used to be. This is where we're getting this issue of either no permit or a minor permit that turns into a gut rehab that then we, you know, have a new family moving into and that still has a VBN on it. So what's the because that's not anywhere in the documents here.
I'll outline broadly and kind of repeating my view, and then I can let housing address some more details. You know, we've gone back and forth on this a couple of times. I mean, my view of this is, especially when the sale of a home without permits to a person with clean hands, like the issue is fraud, and that does not happen. Fraud detection doesn't happen by investigating every single case. We don't audit every single tax return. The long-term solution will be to identify the indicia of fraud for targeted investigation. So maybe a pilot program, and I've suggested we can do that. Where I've been, it has, pilot program for that, and then public education, title companies, realtors, for citizens to report unpermitted work, which I know happens often, more education for potential buyers, and also this is where I've been hoping we can get more collaboration with state attorney's office on prosecuting and seeking restitution for victims of the fraud. We ran some numbers, which housing may have, on what it would look like to even do a pilot of the program to do more proactive investigation. My general concern is that the resources to do that might not meet the cost-benefit analysis of having people go out to every single permit pulled. I'll let
I think what
housing.
we talked about, I appreciate that. What I think we talked about the last hearing was that maybe it's not an actual inspector, but like a phone call to say, hey, we haven't heard from y'all. Like, what are you doing? And there should be a time frame where that call is made or where that inspection comes out. I'm not saying every single one. I'm saying if somebody applied for a permit and you don't hear from them for, pick a number, 6 months, and then somebody calls or somebody pays attention to them to say, hey, what are you doing? Or maybe it's a year, I don't know, but something.
But my reaction initially is that, I mean, I guess it won't hurt, but I don't know if that will detect the fraud because someone with ill intent would say.
But what I'm saying is that it's happening. I mean, we're looking at the codex data, when you remove a codex, and and you look at where the codex is removed, and that house had like an electrical and got a full rehab instead. Like, this is happening, and we need to address it by being proactive. If it's a budget issue, tell me how much you need, we'll go figure it out. I mean, this is something that I've talked about for 5 years, and you had promised, the department had promised that this would happen, something like it would happen. And so just relying on a resident to sue the pants off of the seller at their expense is not a solution to the problem.
Well, I'll let housing address the numbers that they've ran on what it would look like to do the program. My initial reaction is that the resources to have inspections or even proactive calling would be better spent on the rest of the permit system, getting permits up the door faster. And I just said it's not suing, it's not a civil suit. It should be the state attorney's office bringing fraud cases on behalf of people with clean hands who are the victims of this fraud.
Well, we've done a campaign on the, make sure, and we've worked with the realtors to make sure they're looking for the code map, when they're doing that. We're continuing to do that. We put that awareness out there. We passed my bill. It's still, people are still doing, selling those properties. What I'm asking for, and again, maybe it's the phase 2, but at least tell me that you're working on phase 2 at some point in time. Right? I get that you want to put the system back together in the way that it's supposed to be. Fine, good. Maybe we'll get people that are actually following the law after that. But I do think that there still needs to be some way, and maybe we can narrow the scope of what this looks like. Is it just if they do an electrical, or if it's just, I don't know. But I'm happy to look at the codex removal data that I've looked at to figure out what exactly is being applied for, and then the fact that it is a full rehab. I mean, we've seen it. And so I think that there has to be this proactivity. There has to be. And like I said, that's one of my budget asks is to figure out like, what is it that we need to be able to do? Maybe again, it's not an inspector, but it's very important that we get this done. Extremely important, because our reputation as a city about good housing stock is on the line if we do not do this.
Does anyone from housing have the numbers handy about the research? No? Okay. So I'm sorry, I guess we'll owe you a response. I apologize. I know the numbers were collaborated. I did not focus on.
I need it in a week.
And
To be clear, can you specify exactly what you want? Because I heard 3 different things.
Right. What I think that Director Williams was saying is that they have started to look at this and thinking about what the budget numbers would look like. So I want that. I also want to understand what they're looking at in terms of if they're actually thinking about doing this, what is that to be? Because I was supposed to get that today at this meeting.
So can I fine tune it for you? What I'm hearing, and I'm putting my media hat on, is that you would like to know the budget the budget costs. In that cost, you want to know what the staffing cost would be for it. And then in terms of the capacity of human capital. And then potentially what technological capital you can invest into it to find this. I just want to be specific enough so that they have something to feed into, because if you're not getting what you're getting, then there might be something that they need specifically from you.
Sure, but then also because if I get that you're trying to put the entire system together and that's the first priority, totally get it. But when you're gonna start looking at this even further, and maybe the data will change as the permit office changes, which I get, that's why I need to know a timeline as to when that's gonna occur also. And if you wanna pilot something, go ahead and do it in my district. I'm happy to work with you on that.
So back to it, you would like to know the exact budget number for the cost of implementing this program. And what I heard also was, how would they implement it into timeline in terms of what it would look like to implement it? So budget and implementation timeline. Got that, Tony? Perfect. I see Tyler's looking at me, so I guess he has something to say.
Yeah, because, obviously, we are in FY27 budget development. So that is a conversation that Justin, Alice, Deputy Mayor should be having with the city administrator and the mayor. Like, we're not going to get ahead of our normal process for developing the budget to then share that in that way. So, maybe we can connect offline about what it would look like. But right now, that's not something that we're going to be able to do.
So what I'm hearing from my colleague
But you had asked me.
Councilwoman Ramos.
Sorry.
What I'm hearing from my colleague is a frustration, one that I similarly have, hence why I let her go off the way she did. I think what I'm hearing from my colleague and the frustration I've had with other members of this council is that we want to know, what does it look like to be proactive, and then how much will it cost? Because with our own budget authority, if you're unable to get there, we would like to get there with you if we have to make a cut ourselves in the budget, right? So I think she's trying to come up with that number so that she has something to come to the table with in terms of negotiating on the budget.
And I understand that, Mr. Chair, and I think that separately, and I was kind of talking with the Deputy Mayor just very quickly about this, is like, we also need to determine, is there a need, right? Like, if this could just be an observation, but we need to look into whether or not that's actually a need for these proactive inspections that the councilwoman is referring to.
Let me clarify.
Sure.
There's a need, right? This thing is happening, but there are levels of priority, and as we have seen over the last year in this field of permits, there have been a number of things that we've had to work through, and we're happy to say that those things, we're starting to see the yield of those results. We need to do the work of prioritization and understanding where this fits in that prioritization as we're trying to increase the amount of permits that are getting out and increase the satisfaction of the customers. I don't want to minimize the concern that you're presenting, but I do want to understand that we have competing priorities that need to be assessed together.
No, I understand that, which is why I said that if you're working on the entire system, that makes sense, but I just need assurance that we're actually thinking about this,
Oh,
because
yeah.
I don't have that
Yes,
right now.
ma'am. We are definitely thinking about
And when, and the other thing about the budget is that, we're supposed to get our budget letters to you on Friday with amounts. With an amount. I can estimate, I'm just gonna ballpark it, but that may not be the right thing.
So Councilwoman, I'm noticing thread lines here. This goes back to the conversation we've had about code enforcement. And I think that that's something we should have. This is the same issue. It's the same issue. But I think instead of it being the permit office, and this just came across my mind, this is a broader conversation about code enforcement, because I get the calls at 11 o'clock at night or at 6 o'clock because someone's doing work, because no one's at city government to actually respond to it, right? So I think that is a broader conversation about code enforcement. So I would say, let's parking lot it. I feel like I'm in a training. Let's put it in the parking lot in terms of, let's push it on that end, because obviously they're trying to stabilize the system. I think we can, I'm just trying to split the baby. Let's discuss it on the code enforcement side in terms of staffing levels and how we can get there to catch it as well, whether it be complaint driven, or if we're noticing a number of 311s in terms of heat mapping it. It's something I've been discussing with a number of residents in my district. I think if we're heat mapping it based off what we're seeing in neighborhoods where there is people interested in doing development but not doing it the correct way, I think we can meet your and my frustrations there, and then allow the permit system to stabilize until we can figure out another system for it. Because the last time we had a code enforcement hearing, there was a conversation around who can call and follow up on things. I think that's something that we can look at, which may be budget neutral, because it may be a community aid that may make $30,000 that's making the phone calls or follow up on things. So there's ways that we can get there. It's just that we need to have a conversation. So I think we should have a conversation offline about it and look at it from the code enforcement side of it. And I'm happy to lead that for you if you need me to.
Well, no, I appreciate that. I think there's other questions that I have for code enforcement, right? They didn't have a number for us as to how many code enforcement inspectors that they need after our last hearing for both the interior work in terms of rental as well as the exterior. And then you've got, Mr. Campbell's team, who I think are amazing and great. He needs more people to be able to really try to figure out like if people are working without permits, but that's all complaint based. I'm actually trying to be proactive here. And so I'm willing to have this conversation offline so we can move forward in this hearing. But, we really need to have something by the next hearing, because I know we're going to have one, that we can at least have, some more solid thinking about what this is going to look like.
Yeah, and I'm happy to discuss it offline, because I think there's two means to it. So I know for a fact that there's a repeated offender who will get permits in one section of my district, not get permits in another section of the district. And I think that if we can be both reactive and proactive, if I know that John Smith keeps doing the same thing in different portions, maybe we can start having a bad actors list and looking at who those persons are, because then we start targeting. I think comes back to that conversation about target enforcement too.
I think it's fair for us to give you numbers and whatever costs. Again,
Yes.
I'll just reiterate from my perspective as the permit guy, I'd rather have every dollar go towards getting permits out the door and inspections for permits. And also, I'm looking at a program from Denver where they've made it easier for minor residential work to be done without plans, but they do more inspection, like a pre-inspection consultation to avoid the need for plans. That's more inspector resources for that versus the proactivity. I'll pitch again, my policy suggestion is both state attorney's office or even state solicitor office, we could sue on behalf of people, victims of fraud. We could work with legal aid and work with other legal organizations to help prosecute from the back end to actually get the bad actors. And if you know who these people are, let's go after them and bring the hammer and make a name out of them, and so that people understand, that there are victims here and we need to hold them accountable with the punishment. That will help deter the people who are doing this without.
Except most of the time they do that if it's like multiple, which we do have, but sometimes it's a one-off. So, I think I'm happy to move on from the subject, Mr. Chair, but this definitely needs a lot more conversation. And just disappointed that, we didn't get any further in this conversation than we did in the last hearing.
Let me put one more policy idea in the record is that, as a lawyer, if I were doing a real estate transaction and didn't do the due diligence, I would be sanctioned by the bar. And I think the realtors should be held to a standard too, that they're being paid by clients to represent a buyer in a transaction, they should have the level of care and either be ethically sanctioned or be accountable by their board to say, hey, you messed up, and now we're going to, you know,
Yeah, I mean, I
ding your
have a
license too.
constituent that's suing the pants off of everybody, okay? So I'm just waiting for that to go
Yeah,
through to
and
kind of see how
I
that's gonna
think-
work.
And I think we need to move on, but that's a broader conversation because there's responsibilities for the title companies as well in this. Because they will have to check for the inspection reports. So I think that is something that we need to have a broader education and conversation because everybody purchases title insurance and they have insurance claims for this. So we need to, I'll parking lot it now and we bring it back up for code enforcement hearing that we're supposed to have in a few weeks. And then I'll yield to Councilman Jones. Then I'll
Thank
get
you.
back to you, Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's me. All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams, for being here this evening. While I'm excited to hear about the progress that's being made, I also have to echo what's been said by my council president that, you know, while we may hear about progress, what I'm hearing from residents and people in the city is that, you know, they're still running across the same frustrations. So with that said, we can probably go back and forth over and over based upon what the progress is. So I just want to take a second to kind of pivot at like just the financial like aspect of it and kind of see what we're getting. So my question is, could you tell us like the total cost of the permitting system since like the initial implementation of Acela to like present day? What has the city spent?
Do we have that number? Yeah, we can make that a follow-up item. I mean, there was a contract that went to the Board of Estimates for Acela, I think actually two, or, well,
Okay.
I don't want to misspeak.
Because, you know, that would also give us an idea of, you know, whether or not we're getting what we're spending our money on and whether or not we feel like we're getting what we're paying for. And that's kind of another thing to look into. I guess my second question is, I'm not sure if you have the answer to either, is how much revenue the city has generated from permits during this period, like this new period, and probably how much are we looking to spend next year in the permitting system? Because I understand the first year you kind of may spend more money, so this number may be inflated, but next year, how much are we planning on spending on improving the system versus how much is generated?
I wish I meant to look at the numbers for revenue collected before this hearing. I didn't have a chance to. I know there's also discussions about fees. As I know generally the fees that we have assessed for permits and specifically the zoning board, which I'm closer to, does not cover the cost of the work. And so that's the general theory about the
Exactly.
fees that cover the work. And I hear from many developers, the wealthier ones usually, like they'll pay whatever just to get something done quickly. And so that's one of the suggestions people have thrown out of like, can we have a fast track or something? People who pay more. That raises equity concerns in my mind of like, if you let the rich Lexus Lane versus the average Joe, John Q. Public homeowner. But I think it's something to look at of like, are our fees covering our work? And if we could have the fees cover the work to get the right amount of people and staffing to get permits flying out the door for everybody, that would be a system that I think everyone would support. But I know there's more discussions about the fees that I think the fees for permitting need to go through the statute process, so that'll be in front of the council. And so I think it's something that we'll have to have a collaborative discussion about of like, does that level make sense? Should we be maybe even charging more to ensure we have enough staff to do the work?
Yeah, and also it will, you know, give us a level set on, you know, what are we spending money on and what kind of services are residents getting on the back end and kind of trying to figure out what all that looks like rather than having the feel-good conversation of, you know, how is residents feeling the permit system is treating you while you're saying it's obviously improving. We don't necessarily get that feeling. So if you go and get that information back.
And I want to give
I'd
voice to
appreciate
the calls you get, because obviously I get calls as well, and obviously the squeaky wheels bring the call. If you got a permit, and it went through smoothly, you're not going to call and say thanks. So there is kind of a bias towards people who have issues, but I'm not minimizing it because I recognize with the median 3-day issuance for residential permits means there's half of the permits are beyond 3 days to issue, which is a long time for some people, and it can be many, many days and months even. So I'm not saying mission accomplished yet, but we're turning the corner and we have many things to do.
God, it probably shouldn't take long to get this information. You know how long it may.
So your request is, and maybe.
Just request is the total cost of all contracts related to the city implementing the permit system. That's one. The other one is how much revenue the city has generated from the permit system since the implementation. And I guess third, I've made a double question, but because I'm only allowed two, I had to squeeze that one in. How much you plan on spending on FY27 on the permit system?
I'm presuming that is a committee request.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Then it did not count.
You know what? It was a double question at the end. That's two.
It's okay.
Compound.
Okay. Councilman Blanchard.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. So not to bring, good news to an oversight hearing, but something. So I'm a really big believer when we talk about this stuff in looking at throughput. Like what are the outcomes we're getting, everything. And I just want to point out to everyone that the month of January actually saw the most UNOs on VBNs since DHCD's been tracking those. So it was 129. So that's really, really good. And obviously first off, that's, all the men and women doing God's work, rehabbing these homes. And there's a ton of city and state support with nothing to do with the permit process, but it's good to see we're at least in that position on that. That is really important. Talking throughput, something that I would like and this would probably be for Mr. Williams to talk me through, but a lot of the data in the presentation definitely, it seems like this calls for optimism, certainly the cut down on residential timelines. But when I look at the weekly permits issued comparing 2025 to 2024, even from like that May to November timeframe, we're still at it. It's still like going from like 850 to 650 averaged out a week. Is this a fair metric? Because that seems like the right end goal, right? Is our permits actually getting issued? Is this a fair apples to apples comparison between Acela and the previous system?
I think the better measure would be just applications in and versus applications out, because there is some variation. And I was looking at numbers from like 2025 to 2024, and there are fewer permits issued, but I think there's some explanations for that. Some are, big projects like the T. Rowe Price headquarters generate like 20 permits for different trades in the building. The Under Armour's campus came online, Lock Landing, so most new townhomes require 5 to 10 permits. But people who do a gut rehab can choose to do multiple permits, or they often just do one permit. So they can do a permit for the entire full gut rehab and plumbing and electrical and mechanical. Whereas you'll see like the bigger home builders will do separate to get them all timed up separately. So a subcontractor will pull the permit for electrical wiring. So that means the numbers of permits issued is sort of variable. I think it's fair to compare and benchmark year to year, but there's gonna be some variability just based on like that. Like one home could be a new home that generates 5 or 10 permits, one to be one permit. So it doesn't really tell the full story, but I think it's fair to say permits in, permits out, are we hitting that number? We have been recently. Like permits in, we're keeping track and notching above the permits in, getting more out the door than are coming in.
Okay. And I guess there's no committee request attached to this, but I guess just kind of I think having a clear sense of is less stuff getting built in the city? There's a couple different reasons that could have been happening in 2025. I certainly think the permit change probably played a very substantial role in it. I guess I'm concerned that when we look at some of the data on here, we could be still seeing significant suppression in what's getting built. And so something that I'd be interested in like learning more of is like, when are we actually like, and it's a hard question to answer, but like, when are we back to the pre-Acela mark on this?
I concede that yeah, even the median figure is skewed by the ones that are issued. So like things that are issued are going to be issued in a certain time, and that doesn't count the ones that are still in the queue being reviewed. And there are, unfortunately, especially ones that were permits issued and early or applied for early in Estella before the changes were made, are still encountering a lot of the delays that I mentioned, like they're not assigned to somebody, so they're stuck in limbo.
Yeah.
Going forward, we've made changes so that permits in the past few months have been going through faster because we have auto assignments for newer permits that like, once you go through one step, it goes to the next person directly and doesn't just sit in a box. Unfortunately, the older permits are still stuck with,
potentially
and so
weighing
that's
that
taking
down.
manual work and like manual like printing out CSV files and assigning it to people, very
Okay.
cumbersome and not efficient. But I mean, that's where it's like getting through that last bit of stuff that was applied for in the early months of Acela.
Okay.
Get them out the door.
Definitely something to just be keeping in track in here. One other thing, I kind of a question, also kind of flagging on the last slide that y'all had, the one that had it cuts off on here, but it's the additional reforms and whatnot. Something that I think is actually really, really important, and I'm excited to see it in here, is this pre-approved plan library. This is something that I've been hearing talk from the state DC level, sister cities doing similar stuff. The Congressional House of Representatives just passed legislation and bipartisan legislation. I didn't even know they did that. But that would help fund cities doing pre-planned permitting book type things. And so we've got 20-something thousand vacants. Please tell me that this is involved some way where in the next year or something like that, I've got a vacant. I want to build a house on it. I can walk in at 8 a.m. I say, I'm going to build that house in your permit book. And they say, okay, boom, 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 right? And I'm walking out with lunch with like the pre-approved set of plans and everything.
That is precisely my goal. And Baltimore, I think, is better positioned than most because we have standard. We have 14-foot wide row homes that are vacant and 16-foot wide and 18-foot wide. So I think we can have some standardized plans and then even having them, and they can be minimal variation. So even the smaller architects won't be put out of business because they can say, hey, here's a pre-approved plan that's good to go. Just make a small tweak because your door is on this side of the house and that side.
Sure.
I'm pressing the wrong button. I'll add to that this is something that falls under our Reframe Baltimore like project management team of a number of different things to be like helping to pull through on that, as well as coordination from the prefab component to also we're looking at the modular pieces as well and partnerships there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you both. Really interested to see how that develops because I think that is, even if we continue to have challenges and like the permitting system, the beauty of permitting of the pre-planned stuff is that it circumvents a lot of those challenges. So
Yes, and I've identified even a problem is like even our sample plans for the regular homeowner to say like, hey, we need a plan if you're doing interior alteration for your bathroom and you're moving walls. We need
I
require
gotcha.
plans,
Yeah.
but our plans that are sample plans aren't easy for the layperson to interpret.
Similar.
It's like over-engineered, and so people get confused and get angry and call. And I said, no, this is a sample, but actually all we need is like even a napkin sketch plan in some cases, but people get intimidated. So I think we need to just have better samples of all
Yeah,
different types.
makes
That's
sense.
one of the things I didn't put there is like, yeah, if you're building a deck, here's the path, and here's what a plan we want to see looks like.
yeah,
And if you're doing a gut rehab, here's a plan you can pull off the shelf.
Yeah.
That's what we want to see.
for sure. All right, thank you, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman. I just have two questions. One is for BSID. Have we built a system to ensure redundant systems when we're changing over the systems? Because this is the second time we've had a major issue like this with moving from one system to a new system.
Sorry, I missed a couple of the words. Would you mind repeating that
So,
for me?
when we moved to Workday, there was issues with ADT in terms of payment systems. And then now we've gone from the legacy system here in permits to the new system. There's always an issue with transitioning from a legacy system to a new system. What are we doing to protect us from this thing happening a third time? It's becoming apparent that this is the biggest fear I have whenever someone says they're rolling out a new system, city government.
So thank you for the question. I'll have Rob, you speak in a minute. We are actually looking, Council Chair, you mentioned a couple of things in your opening remarks, right? Around, we need to learn from this and not do large changes. And that's something that both Mayor Scott, city administrator, have also asked us to move forward with, right? So there will now be, it will be more incremental. It will not meaning parallel systems, right? Looking at parallel incremental changes, longer model office periods. This also means really looking at the business processes up front, so it's not a lift and shift, right? Also means more time and more resources and money, right? But it will enable us to have a better product. Around the data, I'll have Rob speak around that specifically and what we're doing there.
So one of the things that's really critical is really thorough testing and being able to automate that testing. And that is a new practice, unfortunately, to a lot of areas in the city, that rigorous automated testing that's repeatable over and over again. It takes time to develop that, but that is one of the key areas when migrating data that we're looking to improve. And as Leila mentioned, that model office period is essentially a parallel period. It does take more coordination and more time, but it allows staff to see, okay, here's the original system and here's the new system, and do comparisons. But it does cause extra load on staff doing that, but you get more validation.
I appreciate you for that, because I'm willing to, I appreciate that pain, because I know when I was at City Schools, we built an entire system where we had transcripts that were paper. And we had a year to figure out to go completely cloud-based on a system and transferring the data over, ensuring it was positive. And it took, we had to hire people, 40 people external to the organization to just scan alone, because all the transcripts went back to the 1920s. And then we had to have people who were willing to train every person down to the school secretary at every school on how to actually input the data into the system. And then we had to dummy test the system for 6 months before we went live, because in the school district, if your data is wrong, you don't get paid for the student, right? So everything is important, and I want to make sure that we get there. But also, my biggest issues, like the complaints I've heard, is around discovery phase, that staff were not included early on in terms of what the system will look like from our side of it. So I'm still hearing from staff that they have to go out of one system into another system to actually address permits. And I don't know if that's because there's a lack of training, or the system just doesn't work the way they need it to work. So I'm wondering, are we gonna put any SOPs in place for how we do discovery with staff who actually will implement the system? Because the implementers are mostly important.
So we're developing a playbook around how we approach applications, and a piece of that is definitely discovery, incorporating more frontline staff in those, making sure that we're also looking at those processes up front, right? So that we're getting the process, but also talking through how to improve that up front, but the wider stakeholder group. And what I'll add is making sure that people have dedicated space and time to work on that as well.
Okay, that's helpful. That actually makes me feel better. Then, and I just have a follow-up.
I can explain if
Yeah.
I can, because it's come up a couple times. I want to give you background on it, where people have to go to different systems. The Stella data came, they pulled backwards 3 or 4 years of permit history before going live. So like you can see in the system, a permit from 2021 and 2020, but if there is older permit history that's relevant to the new permit being applied for zoning purposes, or for like grandfathering, or seeing if the inspections were closed out, that requires them to go in the old CCE to look at it. So that's probably the thing you're hearing, which is not, it's cumbersome, but I think it is, I mean, sort of unavoidable, but I don't think it's not great, but it's not.
That's where it goes back to that redundancy. So if I'm moving just, let's say, fence permits over first, right? And leave everything else in the legacy system slowly to make sure each permit has this process. It's been normed how you follow that process through with that one permit to the next permit, then the next one. That's what I would have, I feel like if we went that way, we would have been able to have a system that worked, and we would have caught glitches that we knew could happen. And we saw it happen before, as we did on something that's simple, something that's not a major project that could be held up and looks costly. So the other thing that I wholeheartedly hope we are thinking about is that when we do these major lifts in terms of new systems, are we designating a person in that agency who no longer does any other function just to that new system? Because if this is my secondary job, I can't devote myself to making sure that this system is actually going to work.
Sure, I can take that. So it does go back to that dedicated staff time that I was mentioning, right? And yes, that is the ask as we develop systems, is that the resource be backfilled so that they can fully dedicate the time needed in order for requirements, development, all of that.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go back to the council president.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hearing about improvements in today's testimony, but the last time I heard about improvements was during the last hearing. In the time between, I've heard pretty consistently from those who need to pull permits that they're continuing to experience challenges and delays. So my question is, will you commit to establishing within 6 to 8 weeks a formalized monthly feedback loop that provides regular user-informed updates on system changes and performance? And will you ensure that this loop includes the council, users, to the chair's point, the folks that do the actual work in the system, and relevant stakeholders?
So are you asking like a meeting with the stakeholders, or are you saying just to update periodically, monthly, like what's been going on, which I think is fair? I'm just trying to get a sense of what you're asking.
Yeah, we have some folks, several of whom, Justin, you know very well, who are interested in supporting and helping, and they are the permit expediters. They're the ones that are the tinkerers within the system. They are highly, highly knowledgeable because they're doing it, they're the user end of the system, and they're doing it constantly. I think that when we went to the shift to Acela, we did not have those folks necessarily in the room in any kind of formalized, process-oriented way. What I would like to see within the next 6 to 8 weeks is a commitment by you, Mr. Czar, to pull together a group of those folks with the folks in DHCD, in fire, to stress test, to actually hear from the end user. Because again, I'm seeing data in your presentation which is not matching the lived experience of the people I'm hearing from, and that makes me nervous about just the integrity of where we're going here. And so that's what I want to see. I'm asking for a loop. I want the council to be engaged in it. That's where I'm trying to go.
I'm gonna just jump in on this one a little bit. So one, we have held monthly focus groups with different stakeholders, including high-end users, like, and continue to add people to those groups. And those groups have been meeting since before Acela launched on a regular basis in terms of, I forget what our official name is of that work group, but we have that regular meeting where we get feedback from the high-end users, as you described, the tinkerers, the Lou's of the world that we all know, or Ms. Junker and others that are part of that conversation. And that started when we originally met with the MBIA months before the launch to bring them on board to provide that level of feedback and loop. So those meetings are happening with that group. I would say that, and I would defer to the Director Williams, that we would confer with the administration as it related to other parts of your question. But I just wanted to clarify that there has been engagement with those high-end users, with the tinkerers, with the expediters for an ongoing basis since before the launch.
That is odd to me because one of those tinkerers that you named asked literally for this at our last conversation. The deputy mayor was there, said it would be great for us to be included in some kind of feedback loop. So I don't know if like signals are getting crossed here or what, but that was, this whole recommendation came out of talking to one of those folks who is, in colloquial terms, a permit expediter, who is deep in the system. And so again, I think what I'm asking for here is a recurring meeting that has council participation, that has both sort of the front end user and the back end user in the same space together, seeing how we're doing so that that feedback can be made in real time.
I guess I'm willing to commit my own time to do that. I'm hesitant to bring the other agencies in because I want them processing permits, to hear the concerns. I think that's fair to do. My big picture, I guess, response is I recognize the pain that they're feeling because like they're saying, hey, what the hell is this simple thing? And it's still having some error on the website. There are, at the slide, I guess 3 and 4 showed there are 30 things that were done. They were kind of small on their own, but coming together, it's like making measurable progress. And I thought to myself, we should probably put it on the website to show that, hey, here's what we've done, just to people might see that and say, oh, they are doing things. You've not seen everything when you only apply once a week, but eventually they're coming together to make some substantive change. I think it's fair, and then also I guess I'd say like it'd be more fast plan called for the advisory group, which I still intend to stand up. It's just been every day, still working with the Acela team to move things forward.
I really, Director Williams, I appreciate that. Can we get a clear commitment to this committee that within 8 weeks you will convene a group of Ms. Junker, Mr. Liu, the Nate Prettles, the Albert, all the folks who just do this constantly with, and this was the chair's point, the folks at the sort of ground level of the agency, like you overseeing this, but the folks who are day-to-day going back and forth in the fire department, in the Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as some representation from the city council.
Can I say maybe we start with that first meeting, so the next meeting of the group that the commissioner mentioned is the 27th, and maybe we could open that up to the full people that weren't on your list. So I'm looking at the list of invitees. I don't see like Lucatelli on there, but my thinking is at least the first meeting we could see how that goes with everybody. Just my fear is just taking up more staff time, but I think it's fair to have better feedback, and I agree. I'm hearing from people like them on a one-off basis or weekly and daily sometimes, but I think it's fair to have a better, even open session to brainstorm, and they say, oh, this is what I'm seeing. There's some education. We also have the DHCD trainer started a month or 2 ago at this point, who sort of tasked to both do internal training, but also then help think about the external training materials that need to be provided. So their feedback would be good to help inform our trainer to the people who aren't the super users, just the average users, to help navigate things. So I think it's a worthwhile exercise. My only fear is like committing to like many months of this, but I think it's worth starting and seeing how this one goes. I can commit to meeting myself, and then if it makes sense to bring other agencies in too. But it's one of those things where the fire team is already, spending a lot of time getting permits up the door. So that's my fear of just committing their time to meet and not do permits is like meeting. So.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I concur with the director about staff time. The plan, the Be More Fast plan does already call, as the director mentioned, for an advisory group. We can commit to giving you, when we provide information in a week, a timeline on when we will get that group stood up as outlined in the plan. But I do reserve that us having staff time exposed in this way is just not going to be a valuable use of their time. Or the reality is that the director is the expert here and can answer the questions that are required and requested from the council.
Here's what I would say, Deputy Mayor, in response to that, is that I actually think it would be a very good use of staff time. And I think when we met, myself, you, Ms. Ramos, and a bunch of developers, you had one of the folks who is exactly that kind of person, who is tasked with implementing. And I think it was helpful to have that person there. Again, I don't understand why it is not a useful exercise to the administration to have the end user and all of the component folks together. And I want to be respectful of staff time. I get it. It's a finite resource. I don't want to divert it, but to meet for an hour a month to hear directly from the folks who are constantly in this work just feels like a relatively reasonable, low-level ask. I think just everyone wants to get this right, and you have folks from the private sector, from the other side, literally saying, we will give our time. Like, they got time constraints too, but meet us halfway.
No, I think you're right that we all have the same goal here. And to that point, we do need to get this advisory group stood up, and we will commit to that. But I think that it's important that we let the director lead us on how we do that. He is talking to developers every day, just like you are, just like I am. And we need to give him the responsibility for organizing this, as opposed to, in my opinion, us dictating to him how it should go as the person who is leading the team in this effort.
I understand that, but we've been doing this for a year. And again, I remain concerned. While I liked the data that I saw, it did not match with the tone of the folks who are tasked with doing this work. And so I remain concerned that we're not making progress fast enough on Be More Fast and on this critically important work. And we hear from all of our partners at the state, at the in the private sector, in the nonprofit development community. We hear from them all the time that this is the thing that is inhibiting the mayor's very admirable plans to rehab vacant houses and to grow our business community and to grow housing. And so again, I want to be respectful of this committee's time, and I don't want to overhog the mic, but I gotta say, I'm not feeling like we're being met halfway here, and that is unfortunate.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Mr. President. And honestly, I think that this administration has been more than forthcoming about the challenges. We've been forthcoming about the work that we're doing to get us where we need to be on permits. We've come to the meeting that you organized with some of the folks to talk about their firsthand experience of what the issues are, what we're doing to fix it. What you all are talking about is literally in the Be More Fast plan. It calls for the creation of this advisory body. I think that what we can do, internally, our team, is we can reconnect and huddle on, what it could look like to speed that process up and get back to you all on what that could look like. But I don't agree with the notion that we're not meeting you all halfway. We've partnered, we've answered every question this council has sent, the pre-hearing questions, we've met with you all, right? We are doing our level best to show, and we've made an effort, and we've made progress, as you've seen in the deck. The progress is there, right? It's not an overnight thing. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. But to say that this administration is not meeting this council halfway, it's just not, it's not meeting the partnership that we've had leading up to this hearing specifically.
But respectfully, the data does not match what I am hearing and what I think colleagues are hearing on the ground. So instead of going back and forth, why don't we all commit to meet together if we are essentially saying the same thing, which is that there needs to be an advisory group of folks who are both within government, outside government, that can meet each other and collaborate to develop a feedback loop. I would just love to hear when you all can, when we can do that.
We can commit to that conversation for sure. Let's try to schedule that within the next week or so.
You got that, Tony?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question about, one of the things that we have kept hearing was around the, one of the clogs in the system was the lack of electrical reviewers. And I'm wondering where we are on, more electrical reviewers. That seemed to be like one of the big stopping points, because there was one and then she was gone and then she came back and then there's this. So can you tell me a little bit about where we are there?
I'll let, I guess, housing talk about the staffing, and then I'll start it up top saying, yeah, I recognize there's a couple different issues with the review process. I think I would love to look at how do we reduce the workload. So that's like, how do we look closely at what types of work require plans, what doesn't require plans. I think sometimes there's a lot of custom practice we've done without looking closely, like, do we really need a plan for this sort of thing that needs to be reviewed? That takes up time. And also, what kind of position or what kind of background is required for the reviewer? So, like, this is where the job posting currently, goes back like 15 years, where we switched, for every agency have a different position, to now everyone has an engineer one. DPW, DGS, DHCD, and the engineer one job posting reads as a generic job posting for an engineer. Doesn't say you'll be reviewing, does not say you will be reviewing plans. It just says engineer one. And so that's one thing I could need to look at. It's like, can we make that easier? There's civil service concerns, but I think my reaction is we need to look at that and also maybe have a separate job position called plans reviewer and HCD. So that's one specific thing, and then housing can update on the staffing.
Yeah, so we actually had interviews yesterday. Today is the 10th, correct? Yes. We've had interviews yesterday and today for the one electrical reviewer, electrical engineer open position, and then we are actively recruiting for the architectural position. We also are working with the procurement office on looking at a contract that we can piggyback off of that would provide that back end, like that additional temporary support while we are actively filling positions. Right now, the current temporary staff, so if we needed somebody, if a position became vacant and we needed to have a body to help move things, the current temporary staffing agency does not have the qualified engineers to be able to do that. So we've worked with Director Manny to find a contract that we can utilize to help backfill while we're continuing to recruit for those staff members.
And how many eventually will we, like, what's your ideal capacity for the, I mean, I understood that you were doing a little bit more of an assessment at this moment about what the capacity is needed, but mine, it's gotta be more than one, is what I'm saying. Like how many are you looking to hire?
I would defer actually early to the statements earlier that the deputy mayor and Tyler mentioned, that that's part of what we've been putting together as part of the budget process with the administration.
But you're gonna hire more than one, is what I'm trying to get at, like, right? Yes?
Yes, ma'am. As part of the budget process, where the team is assessing and have put in requests for the enhancement. So as we go through that process, when you receive the budget, you'll see what we think is the appropriate amount of staffing to increase in the engineering function.
Are we waiting for the beginning of the fiscal year to hire? I mean,
Well, no, to the commissioner's point, we are looking at piggybacking on another contract to supplement the staffing in the engineering space. We all agree that specifically with electrical engineering, we got one person. That's not enough.
Right.
So we are working hard quickly to supplement now, but also for the future to be able to have a permanent staff in place for the next fiscal.
And we have, there are PINs, they're actively interviewing to fill with full-time city employees, the positions.
How many PINs?
That are currently open.
You need to put the microphone on.
One electrical and one architectural. Open.
Okay, so that's what you're hiring for now, are those open pins?
That's what we're hiring for now, doing the contract, the piggyback contract to add additional, and then have put in, as part of enhancement and part of the budget process, engineers for future.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing all of that. And you said you did interviews yesterday, so that we would hopefully be able to see something, because I think that's one of the big things that we continue to hear. And then we hear that people are waiting for their fire permit, but it's not really fire, it's the electrical, but, so there's all kinds of implications for that. So I think that's a really big one that we'd like to make sure happens. My second
Councilwoman Ramos.
question
That was two.
is, my
was
second
two.
question is
Councilwoman Ramos,
about
that was two.
no, that was one. It was
No, I
about
said follow-ups
electrical.
count. I
I
said
know,
follow-up
but you let
count.
me last time to be
I
able to
know,
do it.
but I'm trying to get home to my kids.
No,
That was
I get
two.
that, but this is important.
I will grant you this one question, and then I'm going on to Councilman Jones.
Okay, I appreciate that.
I'm trying to make
Thank
the
you.
bedtime.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things that I know is a big deal in terms of the sort of timelines for reviews is that often there may be someone who puts in their permit and then immediately calls me and says, can you expedite this, right? And I don't know that they had just applied until I say something to Justin, and he'd be like, hey, you just put it in yesterday, right? So is there a way that there could be a better way that we could look into the system and say, oh, you just applied yesterday, man, you're not getting this today, just to help to manage expectations. Now, there are some that are delayed, and there's, we have to help to expedite that. But then we also need to know, what are the review times? So for like a demo permit, if it's supposed to be a 2-week review time, then I need to know that so that we can manage expectations, rather than having someone come to us and then you have to address it because I'm the one or one of the council members are the ones to do it, right? Like, I'm trying to be fair here, but we need the information so that we can help manage expectations. Is there going to be something where we can see what's going on?
Yes, so the public-facing ACA portal needs improvement. It does show currently, it says expiration date, but that's the application date, unfortunately, and Acela keeps saying they can't change that now, which is a frustration of mine. But there needs to be improvement, not just for what it says, expiration, but really means application date, but my goal is, and City of Denver has a dashboard powered by Acela that shows each review time, not just like from beginning to end, but like each step of the review process, how long it's taken for the past 90 days. That's my goal. I actually had a conversation with Acela last week about how do we get that. Because our folks on our team are very talented OPI data people are saying that you can't do it because of the way the data is collected in Acela. So I'm like, well, Acela, how did this happen? How do we make this happen? If we need to come in person again and lock yourself in a room or figure out what the difference is, like why can't this happen for Baltimore? Because I think it'd be very insightful for you all and also for developers to know, okay, this is the average time it's gonna take to get a permit so they can forecast and do pro formas and all that. So definitely something I wanna do. And then also, I think I said on the public facing dashboard, have both the timeline and also like who has the reviews so that you know, and you can see, oh, it's with that person as opposed to going to me. And then you might say, oh, it just got to that person because it'll show the actual due date. Because that's one of the problems we have now is with when there's plans review and there's multiple cycles of review, the due date stays the same, even though we just got it back from the applicant. And so it might look to you and the public as the due date was 2 months ago, but really is 2 weeks from now. And that's another problem with integration that we're working on.
Well, I'm glad it's on the radar, but what I'm saying is we want to be helpful. So this information is going to be important. Do we have a timeline of when, it sounds like it's just still in the conversation phase, not at all in the implementation.
Right, so like that specific integration, it's important to me. So I say, well, all that integration with Project Docs and the public-facing dashboard, I'm having a conversation with Acela. I think I just got an email from them this week about like, can we make this happen or what it's gonna take to make it happen? Part of the problem is our folks are doing the other fixes that are also mission critical. So it's like, robbing Peter to pay Paul is part of the problem, but it's definitely important to me to help manage. And I think it's important for our supervisors who lack the tools now to manage well because they're not seeing a clear due date that's accurate and like true, because they're sort of seeing stuff that might be old, but it might not be, or it might be, need to be closed.
So, can you give me a timeline by the time we meet again? Because I don't think this is gonna be a fast situation.
Right, I mean, hopefully, yeah, I mean, literally this conversation would be happening, so definitely by the time we meet again, so I can make it a note, if not a follow-up, but official note to
Thank you.
myself.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, I greatly appreciate it.
Councilman Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, often when I receive phone calls, people are just complaining, my permits are delayed, right? My permits, and it's kind of a general concept. When there's multiple different type of permits, there's your CHAP, there's your fire, there's also your, demo, whatever permits there are. Has there been research done to kind of look and see which permits in particular are the ones that are dragging over the, estimated amount of time? If so, like which ones are they? And is there a plan to kind of address that one specific category? Because I realize all of them have various different mechanisms you may need to address.
So not specific like data-driven research across every single permit type. I mean, one goal of mine, which I intend to have happen on the sooner end, is we have a website now with a permit page that I believe, I haven't checked it, I checked it today, but I didn't read it closely enough to confirm that it has every single permit the city has in one place, because that's one of the problems is people say, I need a permit, and they don't, probably don't tell you what kind of permit. They say they need a permit without telling you as council members, I need a CHAP approval versus a fire protection permit versus a special event permit. So one thing is like it's better education, but there are just a lot of permits and a lot of things we do as a city. I have anecdotal evidence about where things are sticking across the enterprise, but a lot of it is sort of in the building permits phase. So housing and the cellar system has construction permits, use and occupancy permits, temporary event permits, and demolition permits. Is that moving? Yeah, just fine. So across those, I mean, we see that demolition can take longer, but there's a lot of variables there because there's so many more process steps that need to happen. There's consultations on site. The Department of Finance has to sign off on liens, so and that's complicated, but people who do that more often are usually knowledgeable. So I guess that sort of answers the question. I have some sense of where things are on the construction permit side, less on special events. That's sort of the next phase for me in my head of like where to go and be more fast work is like the right-of-way permits, which include street cuts, but also special events like on public property, which I hear concerns about, but I don't have a good sense yet because I haven't dug in the data to see like where things really are getting stuck. Is it on the applicant? Is it on us?
Okay, and my second question is, like since I've been in office, I've been hearing about the new permit system is the delay in the permit process. I guess my question was, what was the cause of moving to a new permit system? Like how old was the system and kind of what caused us to be here in the first place? Was it working or was it not working? If you give me some background information, what created the move?
Yeah,
to
I'll let
this
housing,
new
I'll give my first take because I've worked on this. I was a city stat analyst in 2011 and 12, and that's when we had the in-house built system. CCE, built by a person in the housing department who built it, and then I know he left cities. As I understand it, part of the issue was it's sort of on its last legs with data issues, and so I'll let them fill in some of
The system was at the time, it was over 15 years old. It was built in-house without, as Mr. McBride stated, and in reference to the chair's questions, when it was built without the normal kind of protocols and documentation for how it was built. But I will defer to my colleagues at BSIT because one of the key things when we say that it was on the last legs of the system was we could not make significant changes or updates to the system. It even impacted the ability to add new users. We were able to try to figure out a work around that at one point, and when you hired someone new and planning needed to be in. But there was another key issue related to security functions within the system that it really was one of the key things in terms of when we would talk about it being held together with like duct tape and prayers. So I don't know if BSIP wants to add to that part.
I mean, you captured it pretty well, right? But again, there was security concerns. It was very, I'll say rigid, right? So like if you need to go and make an update, that's not something that was easily able to be done. And in some cases, we just couldn't do because not having the code repository and the age. Again, though, I go back to that legacy system, that age of it put us at risk for it could have just failed and we wouldn't have been able to put it back together with the duct tape and bubble gum.
Thank you.
Councilman Blanchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Briefly on the message board, so, and this might be for the CIO or Mr. Williams, I don't know. Will the message board allow the permit applicant to interface directly with the reviewer responsible for where they are in the process?
Yes.
Okay, great. That was a very quick question.
To build on
Right.
that, I mean, we recognize the pain point, and so kind of getting to the council president's point about hearing some of the feedback, is like things like that, like I'm very well aware that that's a huge pain point.
I've been hearing that a lot too.
And,
Yep.
like, both on the power users, but even like the everyday citizen of not having a clear path to somebody.
It's important for
And that's
everybody.
a customer, I think, like a CRM issue too, because I think our general mailbox for like DHCD permits or DHCD plans review is like monitored by a few people, but it's inundated, and I get copied, they get copied, and everyone gets copied on emails. I'm sure you all get copied, copy the mayor.
Yep.
WBL, so everyone gets copied, and so it's tracking who responded and if there was a response issue that solved it or not is a challenge that.
Yeah. Having it all in one place, I can click this and the message board's there and I can talk to that person. That's going to be very helpful. Okay. And then not to get beyond because there's a lot of important details of all this, certainly, but just to talk back again about like the throughput and measuring the kind of bigger picture, the outcomes of all this, right, is more than just like the time between different states and the permitting process and whatnot. Live Baltimore just had their report, their 5-year report last week. Said roughly what that report said. It wasn't that different from 5 years ago, with some changes, right? Effectively, there's probably demand for us to build 5,000 units of housing a year, right? And it's about half those units are, rental units under 1250 or less, and then different types of single families and condos and row homes and all that good stuff. Something that I reached out to Deputy Commissioner Hessler about this back over the summer, and I was surprised that it's not as easy of a question to answer, but is there someone who can say, like, in 2025, we built this many units of this type of housing? Is that currently accessible? Like, is that an easy pull?
It would be a report that needs to be built, but.
Can you say that again?
It would be a report that needs to be built, but the data would be there as far as the number of units, whether it's residential or commercial. So.
And that would be all we would note, right? Like you could, if I emailed you, you could get back to me quickly with, like, by month in 2025, here's how many residential units were received UNOs, but you wouldn't be able to say more than that, correct?
I mean, what more? I'm not sure.
I
what
mean,
more.
how many units just came online in December, right? Like, how do we get that?
We could give you the total units that came online and how many individual properties that was made up of, how many were single unit properties or 1 and 2 or multifamily. So you could break it out in different ways.
Okay.
And to add to that, I mean, that was a big pain point from CCE because we didn't have the ability to do the data analysis at any high level because all we have was a UNO permit and some text. And so we couldn't easily discern, was it a new UNO for a newly built dwelling? Was it someone who did an addition to their house, got a UNO for it? And that's.
So we have some more granularity with the current system and being able to look at that.
Right.
Yes.
what's
And
going
so as I
on.
understand, that was even a problem with our census data, like, we don't report like other city, other jurisdictions do or hadn't previously, the like use and occupancy permits issued for housing starts because of that data issue. So that's one of the things I'm excited about going forward, is that we'll have that ability.
And we do have that now.
So I don't know if the reporting, I wasn't part of the meeting with I want to speak out of turn. I know there's meetings with SDAT about sharing data.
Yeah, we regularly share data with the State Department of Assessment and Taxations on new construction. So, and then they come back, they usually look at the total value of construction to make a determination of where they're going to reassess. So we've been sharing data with them back with the old system. We've been sharing data throughout the launch of the new system. We've recently had some meetings with them to tweak what they're getting to make it clearer for them on what they're doing. So that happens every couple years. They kind of raise their hand and say, hey, you've been sending us this data, but we'd like to see it in a different way. And then we work with them to adjust it. So the new system collects a lot of data and has the ability for us to build reports based off that data. Occasionally, there are things that are asked where we would actually need to go back to the vendor for a more complex report, but for something like you're asking, that's something we would be able to pull out of the system.
Okay.
We have one more too, because Councilwoman Ramos would be probably aware that we even added like a BVRC button to like start tracking that. So that's one of those things where in the old system, we couldn't make any changes because it might break everything. So like now we can be more nimble, and if there are even questions that you have as council members, or they might be something we should track and we're not dwelling units, we already are, but if there's anything else we should start tracking, we can start asking those questions and start building the database.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Council President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I gotta say I'm disappointed in some of the responses I heard this evening. The one thing I am glad that we established is that you, Mr. Williams, are leading this effort. That is good to know, and I hope that it remains that way. I think the residents of this city are expecting real reforms. I pointed to a few tonight that felt like pretty easy lifts. The councilwoman had been asking for something coming into this hearing that was not delivered. So I gotta say, I don't think it should have engendered 10 minutes of pushback to agree to a formalized loop of feedback that includes council participation. But here we are. I just want to close out, and this will be my last question here this evening. The two things that I had suggested, one, consolidation, and so I wasn't clear on what you all were going to do, but it sounds like it's all going to be under your shop. Justin, is that?
No, sir, what we agreed to on the consolidation request was that we would convene as an administration and then respond within a week.
Okay. My staff had given you all ample time, and I think we had discussed this issue, but noted, and I will look forward to hearing back in a week. And then on having a formalized feedback loop, and again, I don't need a new meeting, I don't need it's already in your plan. The housing commissioner said it's already been happening, but I do need to know that folks are going to meet with the folks who expedite permits on a continued basis, where there is going to be some level of participation among the workforce on the city government side, and that there will be council participation in that meeting. Is that something that we're in alignment on?
We're committing to executing on providing a plan for the Be More Fast advisory group as outlined in the Be More Fast plan. And we commit to having a meeting with your team within a week to discuss some of the details that we could not come to agreement on tonight.
I appreciate that. I will very much look forward to that conversation, working with you all moving forward. And again, Mr. Williams, Mr. Czar, appreciate you taking this on, appreciate the chair continuing to convene this hearing, appreciate the vice chair bringing this resolution again and again and again. I'm just going to say this loud and clear in this chamber: the council is going to continue to do oversight. And I want to be very clear too that I am a proxy for all of the folks, all of the input that we are receiving, which to this date has not been positive. So I sincerely hope we are turning that corner. I sincerely hope the data that you all presented tonight points us in the right direction. I know we have incredibly hardworking folks. I'm looking at several of them, but we have to get this right. None of the big plans that we all have for the city of Baltimore in this moment work in the housing space if permits remains an albatross. And so again, appreciate the chair for convening, appreciate the vice chair who has been dogged and persistent in this, and appreciate, I know many hands have been working on this, and I'm hoping we will see some genuine improvement, and I will hear that improvement among the users of the system. That's all I got. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Ramos.
Last item, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask about capacity, but I think that you're going to let us know that in the budget process. Do we, and I don't know, I don't think this was asked earlier, but do we, Deputy Mayor, you had talked about at some point that there would be, we should be able to see a lot more marked improvement in the next 6 months. Is that still accurate?
I don't recall when I said that, but I think we're seeing those improvements today. The presentation that the director gave talks to, residential permits and us reducing the median time by 75%, and that's 80% of the permits that come through the process. And there's still more work to be done, as outlined also in his presentation. I feel encouraged with what the team has done over the time, and I look forward to continuing to come back to this committee with the team and with the director and sharing progress over time.
And when you feel like there's a victory lap to be done, because we should take a victory lap when there is a victory, you don't have really a timeline on that. And I think it needs to be published. Like, we feel strong, more confident in this system because we've done X, Y, and Z, and we've taken all this time.
Look, my opinion is that this can be done, this should not take a long time. But that's just my opinion. At the end of the day, it's about process, it's about executing. And we're a government. There are regulations, there are statutes that have to be clarified. Every time you turn around, there's something that, you're going in this direction, there's something that sort of derails you. And the team's been working through those things. So that's why we hesitate to give some sort of timeline. But I think what we saw today, and what we see every day from all the hardworking folks in government, is people who want this to happen and move as quickly as possible. The pain that the developers are feeling is the same pain that the staff feels, right? The staff gets those calls, and they care just as much as all of us. So while I can't give you timelines, we can commit to being very diligent over time.
Well, I look forward to the next hearing to really see what the progress continues to be, and we'll continue to monitor as well. I would like to recommend a book, Recoding America, which was really eye-opening about how it's very typical for government to just do government things and tech people to do tech things, and the two don't talk, and then we get a disaster like we just had. So I hope that we can avoid that. I think it was a great eye-opening experience for me to read that, and hopefully we can take the lessons from this and some of the things that she talks about in the book to avoid this kind of thing in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank
I
you.
enjoyed her book, and I follow her, I think her Substack, and then even the Why Nothing Works book and Abundance. I think at the time, and as someone in the space, I care about process, I'm a land use attorney, this is sort of my moment for how to focus on getting things done to help build. So I'm excited, and I'm excited with the council and the legislation we passed to make things easier to build. I think it's a great time to come together. And so I think hopefully, and Deputy Commissioner Hessler said the message board will be a victory lap. So hopefully in the next hearing, or if not, then soon we'll have a better timeline on the message board, which will be a big unlock to allow a lot of advancement.
Councilman Jones,
No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Blanchard. I have no questions.
You just want to go home to yours.
It's been a long day. Closing remarks, colleagues. Well, bless you. We're in adjournment.
Thank you.